Seriously, you have to try this now. Wow, am I blown away by the response to the last video, and I'm so glad you guys enjoyed this format, because today we're going to take a look at another iconic but extremely underrated artist, Peter Pollak, also known as Apterus Illustration, as you might better know him. Peter is yet another OG artist that I've been watching for years and years, and only now do I feel even remotely good enough to attempt learning from his work. And just like with Ahmed Al-Duri, we're going to take a look at how he paints skin, but today I kind of want to look at how he paints that dark, dramatic, holographic skin that makes his characters look dead, but not quite. Not all iconic videos are going to be about skin, this just happens to be twice in a row, but I think you're gonna love it regardless. In this video, I'll show you how to pick colors and where to place them, how to pick and place accent colors, and most of all, how to create that dead but alive look. And today's video is gonna be so powerful, it's gonna change your art forever, so make sure you have your listening ears on. As always, this is a plea for engagement, so if you enjoyed this video and learned something, then please do let me know by giving this video a big thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. And if there are any other iconic art techniques you want to see in this series in the future, leave them in a comment below or come tell me on Discord. But yeah, whenever you're ready, let's take a look at painting iconic holographic skin in the style of Peter Pollak. Peter Pollak, better known by his YouTube name Apterus Graphics. I know I said apterus in the intro, but I just googled it and it said apterus. So wait, I'm just now realizing he's changed it to Apterus Illustration. That's how long I've been watching him, you guys. I didn't even know he changed it. However, there really isn't very much information about him out there. All we really know is that Peter is a freelance illustrator and concept artist from Slovakia who is best known for his dark, dramatic character art featuring a bunch of horror-based scenes, but with a sick, playful twist. Seriously, a lot of his work is not for the faint of heart, but that's kind of why I love it. You know I love a good, dark, messed up painting. What first drew me to Peter's work, however, is how he paints skin. Rather than having just a blue-teal tinge to make the skin look dead and spooky like you normally would, he actually paints in a lot of hue variation, but in such a way that the skin has this saturated holographic appearance while still looking A, dead and spooky, and B, like actual skin. I'm gonna try my best to put this into 3 steps, but you guys, this is by no means an exhaustive list, so please make sure you go watch Peter paint regardless. But yeah, let's go. So the first and most important thing about how he paints skin is where he puts certain colors. Before we even get to the holographic bits, we need to put down a solid base for the skin, because skin is translucent, so it's gonna have undertones and subsurface scattering, right? But when you squint your eyes and look at the big tones in the skin, you'll see that the color zones in the faces Peter paints are almost backwards. Normally, in alive humans, the color zones of the face are pretty standard regardless of skin tone. Your forehead tends to have a yellow undertone, the nose and cheeks red, and the jewel veins closer to blue. These are super subtle in real life, but a lot of portrait artists tend to use these color zones as a base to build upon. But looking at Peter's work, while you still have visible color zones, they're like the wrong colors. At first I figured it was just a blue overlay, so I painted a flat blue layer and reduced the opacity, but that didn't come remotely close. Then I thought it might be a hue shift, so I tried changing the hue on a regular human face, or vampire wizard face as the case may be, and it still didn't look right. So then I tried a more extreme approach. I duplicated the layer and inverted the colors. Now obviously the values are crazy, and Peter actually paints the values to be fairly realistic and form-fitting, so I changed the blending mode of the inverted layer to hue so it only affects the color of the layer underneath, and boom, there's your Peter Pollak color zones. And just to make sure this works, I actually took one of Peter's paintings and reversed the process. So I grabbed this painting called Margaret Has Some Weird Friends. Same, Margaret, same. Anyway, I grabbed the close-up of this painting, duplicated it and inverted the duplicate, and then set the blending mode of the inverted layer to hue. Now it doesn't look like regular daylight, because that's not what I'm saying, but if you look at the face, do you see how the jaw is much cooler tone now, whereas you have a lot of warmth at the nose and the apples of the cheek? So although the colors themselves might not seem realistic, the color zones do. My conclusion from this is that Peter basically inverts the color zones of the face and then overlays actual skin tones and lighting effects on top of them, which creates this deeply unsettling feeling where you see the skin and it feels like skin, but something isn't quite right. So for our character today, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna start by roughly airbrushing in some color zones and then duplicating the layer, inverting the duplicate copy and setting it to hue blending mode. Now here my colors were a little too soft, so I had to mess with the levels before duplicating. So if you try this, make sure to use very vibrant base colors. Another random thing I noticed was that Peter sometimes uses a rainbow brush. This is basically any standard brush that is slightly tweaked so that the hue shifts with distance. The bigger the strength of this brush, the broader the hue spectrum it will cycle through, and the bigger the length, the bigger each hue will show before transitioning. At least that's how it works in Krita. I saved this as a preset and went about coloring everything in the skin, starting by color picking the adjustment layer we just made and then letting the brush do all of the fun rainbowing. And here's what we have after step 1. She's terrifying, I know, but I promise she'll start to make sense soon. One of the first things I noticed when it comes to rendering is that Peter sometimes creates a little swatch palette to color pick from. I think this is so clever when you're trying to paint something holographic by hand, because it constantly reminds you to keep switching hues as you go along. However, because I've used a rainbow brush here, I probably won't need a separate palette, but I just thought it was worth mentioning if you're going to paint this by hand. Let's start by placing in some values so that her face looks dimensional and a little less crazy. I'm going to go all around the face, picking up local shadow tones and adding form to her facial features, using shadows to define the eyes, nose and mouth, and you can already tell it's starting to look like an actual face. I then grabbed warmer local tones and airbrushed over the softer planes so that the crazy saturated colors look like they kind of came from underneath the skin in a sense. Now, when it comes to the actual rendering itself, the most common attribute across the majority of his art is this bright teal highlight tone. It is usually super saturated and you will generally see a saturated pale teal highlight at some crucial high points of the face, such as the cheekbone, nose bridge and lips, all areas where you would generally see a warm tone in a regular face. However, you'll see bright saturated mid-tones all over the place, and more often than not, they are usually complementary to the surrounding shadow hue. So if you have a warm shadow, the mid-tone is cool. If you have a red shadow, the mid-tone is going to be green. Where possible, you want to throw in extra little bits of hue and saturation variation, and for the highest planes of the face, you want to paint the highlights to look almost like the crystallized filter has been applied. So it looks almost like a mosaic with sharp edges in between highlight tones. This is by far the longest part of this process because you're pretty much manually painting in all these different hues, but make sure that the majority of your tones lie somewhere in the green, blue or purple range, because these are tones you don't normally see in human skin, and so they add that extra spooky factor to your character. However, one other key aspect that you want to add about 75% into the rendering process is this warm glow on one side of the character. It is very diffuse, but you want to airbrush a bit of golden yellow light just on the planes that face one side. Honestly, even though it is a familiar warm tone, I feel like it further heightens the creepiness of the skin because it really makes you think that despite there being a literal warm light source, the rest of the skin is still reflecting blue and green and purple. So it's not just the lighting that is causing the skin to look all dead and pale, it is the actual skin itself. So after all of the majority of our rendering, here is what we have after step 2. Okay, this one's a little tricky to explain, so bear with me, but one thing I notice in a lot of Peter's speed paintings is that he does this diffuse and mask out thing, and it is actually such a tiny tweak in his speed paintings that if you blink you miss it. Like here, did you catch it? No? Let me slow it down for you. See how suddenly you have a subtle airbrushy overlay and then it disappears in specific areas? Over the course of the painting, you'll see this done a fair few times, and though each individual airbrush layer seems subtle, it all compounds and plays a very important role in the final painting. I don't know exactly what he does because there is no tutorial really and you can't see the layers or anything, but my assumption is either A, he uses adjustment layers to lower the contrast and then layer mask to apply the adjustment to very specific areas, or B, he paints on a new layer with the airbrush and then masks certain areas out. In either case, the result is that you have a soft diffuse overlay in the midtone and shadow areas, but he masks it out in the highlighted areas. Why would he do this? Well, realism. In real life, our eyes have a tendency to focus best and see most details when it is bright out. In a dark room, you lose visual details even though your eyes can see the big shapes. Plus, if you look at photos, even cameras tend to catch the most details in the brighter areas, while the shadows seem to kind of blend into each other. So by creating these diffuse bits in the shadows, Peter is actually enhancing the realism, and also an added bonus is that it adds a whole bunch of hue variation and makes the detailed saturated tones stand out even more because they're now next to very diffuse grayish areas. Another great use for this technique is for subsurface scattering. You'll often see that he airbrushes a bunch of red in the shadows for some parts of the skin and then erases it out in the brighter, more defined areas, again really pushing the realism. So that's what we're going to do, periodically create new layers and airbrush over the shadowy regions, paint some more details in the brighter areas, rinse and repeat. I'm going to be honest you guys, this painting was actually my second attempt for this video. The first one had to be scrapped because with every new iteration I liked it less and less. In fact, you know what? I want to show you the first painting because why not? Prepare to be scarred for life. She's supposed to look like a cool witchy character. Why does she look like she's at a ghostly EDM rave and her favorite song just came on? I don't know. Did I spend hours on that painting only to end up scrapping it? Yes, I did. Did I hate myself for wasting that time? Of course I did. But I suppose that is a lesson in trusting the process, right? Because we don't judge other artists on their progress shots or the several scrapped paintings that they don't share with us. Why do we judge ourselves so harshly through the painting process? Logic? We don't know her. That said, however, I'm actually proud of myself for giving that original painting a bit of time and a fighting chance before scrapping it. Sure, it didn't lead to a finished painting, but it is still art, and any time spent making art is time well spent. But yeah, I wanted to mention this just in case some of you are struggling with being overly critical of your paintings that are still in progress. Sure, know when to scrap and start over, but before you do that, please make sure you've given it time and patience and a fair shot, because honestly, like 90% of my paintings only really come together in the last hour or so. And if it feels like you can't find inspiration within your painting anymore, or as I like to think of it, the painting starts to feel dead, don't be afraid to scrap it and start over, especially if your painting is digital. It's just pixels, you're losing nothing really, but you're gaining hours of practice time, regardless of whether it turns out good or bad. So yeah, I just thought I'd add it in there, but yeah, here's the finished painting, and boy am I stunned at how it turned out. Obviously, I am so in love with how this painting turned out, but you guys, this process made me want to cry and throw up. How Peter does this with every single painting, I'll never know, but then again, I guess that's why his art is so gorgeous. But I do hope you guys have enjoyed this video and learned something from it today, and if you have, then please let me know by giving this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more content. Do you have any specific iconic art techniques you'd like to see in a future video on this channel? Please do let me know in the comments below, or you can come join my Discord server and you can let me know there. There's a whole channel for it. And of course, you can grab even more exclusive content every single week and support me directly over on Patreon. I will leave a link in the video description. Come check it out. And with all of that said, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out some more videos up here and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!